because I think the big news from an American perspective was Jesse Marsch leaving RB Salzburg after some success in the Austrian Bundesliga, obviously doing great things with RB Salzburg in the Champions League, got to coach Erling Haaland, brought in Brendan Aronson, which obviously looked like a genius move, and a lot of good things there. So a lot of hype and energy around Jesse Marsch, and his coaching ability goes to RB Leipzig, and he's fired within a couple months. Not a good look. We know that he's at Leeds. We'll get into that part of it in a second because I do want to have somewhat of a sidebar of a Jesse Marsch conversation. But Heath, why do you think it went wrong at RB Leipzig? Because we know that they made some changes in the front office. They also let go of Konate. He went to Liverpool. Sabitzer ended up going to Bayern Munich. They lost somebody else too. Andre Silva came in, actually. Patrick Schick left, and he was scoring a bunch of goals. Andre Silva comes in, has a slow start. Where do you think it went wrong for him? Was it the wrong fit at the wrong time? I mean, I know he's filling in behind Julian Nagelsmann, who left to go to Bayern Munich as well. It just seemed like a bad mix at the right time. So much so that Jesse Marsch actually said to the front office that maybe I'm not the right guy for the job, which is interesting. And I appreciate that Jesse Marsch would go in and say that. A lot of coaches wouldn't have the courage to go in there and say, I don't know if I'm the right fit for these particular players.
Yeah, they were certainly in a dip of form, and now they're back up fighting for a Champions League spot. And so, to me, it obviously wasn't working. You know, I feel like we hold on to our Americans in a way that we expect them to survive, not just managers, but players, right? We expect George Bello to go and do well at Arminia Bielefeld, where Arminia Bielefeld, buy him, you know, great homegrown transfer for him, but he's still a young player and he's stepping into a storm. And when you asked me in the opener about Hansa Rostock, that's what it was for me. Now, I learned a lot from that, but I would never want to go and do that again. At any point in my career, did I want to go to a club that was fighting relegation? Because it's already stressful enough trying to compete day in and day out and make it, right? So Jesse, as an example, because I know we'll get to the players, Jesse Marsch is one where we expect, because he's a great manager, because he comes from the Red Bull system, that it's all just going to work out, that all the opinions are going to be lined up together, that the players are going to buy into the system. And clearly those players weren't buying into what Jesse was doing. Now, that doesn't mean Jesse's a bad manager. Perhaps it's just a bad fit for him, because we're seeing now Jesse's same motivation. I'm sure he's evolved and he's learned from that time at RB Leipzig and Salzburg. But now he's at least getting some motivation out of these players in a different circumstance, right? And I feel like Jesse is good in an underdog position, given this where the stakes are, versus an RB Leipzig that, like you said, had a bunch of turnover. But it's hard to really say. You guys have both known. You've either played for a manager you thought was going to be great and wasn't, or you went in thinking this manager is whatever, and they ended up being fantastic in a different way and lighting a fire. And a manager from year one survives relegation in Europe, and then the next year might get that same group when he's on the verge of being fired to a Champions League spot. And so it's really hard to describe one single coach or manager and why it didn't work out. It's really hard without being on the inside. Although we do know that he's a pretty intense manager and the demands are pretty high. And if you start to get those ripples in a team, especially in these high demanding situations, that can make a locker room fall apart pretty quickly.
Now, I just want to throw this in, Chuck, before I throw it to you. He was highly regarded within the Red Bull system, right? Coached at New York Red Bulls, went to RB Salzburg. He was
being groomed. He was being groomed.
He did a year with Julian Nagelsmann at RB Leipzig. Like, he's been there before and knows a lot of those players. Now, when he got fired in December, he was in 11th place with RB Leipzig. And obviously he was in a very difficult Champions League group with Manchester City and PSG. So it was in Club Brugge, and it was always going to be a bit of a struggle. They scored a lot of goals, but defensively they were leaking some as well. Do you think, and I just want to throw this out there for the sake of the conversation, do you think that it's harder for players to buy into the manager if he's American because of the stereotypes that are associated with America, instead of just treating him like a human being that knows the game and loves the game?
Soccer.
It's soccer.
I would say for players, the first thing that they look at is your resume. Mm-hmm. And, you know, how were you as a player? In some cases, you know, you get a former player like Zinedine Zidane. If you come in with that reputation as a player, people are excited because they feel like they can generally learn from you, right? I think from Jesse Marsch's standpoint in his career, players are like, I'm not going to learn anything from you in terms of your ability. But as a manager, that's where you're coming in with a different perspective, because you're saying, I'm a student of the game. This is how I can help you tactically and putting you in the position to succeed and putting the right 11 players on the pitch so that the team can have success. So that's one angle is, you're already coming in with a little bit of an uphill battle because of your resume as a player. So now you have to impress them with your knowledge and your training sessions and kind of your results, because your results kind of basically shape how the locker room is going to go.
Right.
And the results weren't coming. So he was pushing a narrative at RB Leipzig, and the results weren't coming. So then all of a sudden, you have some players being like, "This isn't the guy," and that can grow like rapid fire, right? Just as soon as you have a couple of results don't go your way, guys aren't happy that they're not playing, they can turn quick, and then the whole locker room ultimately turns. So I think that was kind of what happened with Jesse Marsch.
And it's specific people too, Charlie. You know, it's very specific people. They start to pull people into their corner. Get the whispering a little bit. There are a few people that are pivotal towards the success of a manager. And when that flips also, they start to, misery loves company, and it's easy to start rallying around tough times against something.
Yeah, especially for a manager who's coming in and still trying to win everybody over, because that can turn very, very quickly. And yes, I don't want to name names, and I hope that Jesse Marsch maybe down the line will give us some insight on which players he thought were throwing him under the bus behind the scenes. He'll never do it. He's too good of a guy to make that happen. But I think those are great points, Charlie. And I'm curious, Heath, if we're seeing something similar at Leeds, and really, do you feel like if they get relegated, Leeds, and they're very close on the precipice of making that happen, do you think Leeds will end up firing him? And that will be, for me, pretty disappointing, because we're trying, I think, as from we've broken the glass ceiling, and from the male perspective, at least for me, that people will trust Americans to go out there and do the job at some of the biggest clubs. That's been proven. And now, even if those guys aren't playing regularly, they still are trusted. And I think that's important. It doesn't seem like we've done that at the manager position. And I feel like,
I mean, in a way, though,
if Jesse gets fired from Leeds, though, we're like, God, we're starting all over. It's like we can't break through that.
But didn't we say that if Jesse got fired from RB Leipzig, he failed in theory, right? If in the way that we judge managers. Sure. Now, I don't think Jesse necessarily thinks he failed. I think it just wasn't the right fit in his mind. And then look what happened. A few months later, he gets a job in the Premier League. That's a pretty incredible movement in terms of respect for a manager. Now, granted, we're talking about American ownership and groomed in RB, but like, you don't get it. There's no nepotism happening when there's millions and millions of dollars on the line. They thought Jesse could be the solution to the problem. Now, if they go down, I still think he's got something there that I hope that they keep him. And I do think that if they didn't keep him, we are now seeing a European-based manager in Jesse Marsch in the same way that
where do you go, though? Like, if he fails at RB Leipzig and then he fails at Leeds, I mean, I throw failure out there with some air quotes.
Here's the problem,
because it feels pretty harsh to say fail.
Yeah, but if
did he get enough time? Did he really get enough time? I mean, Alex Ferguson wasn't crushing it when he first started either.
No, but he does have one task. That's to keep the team in the Premier League. So if you fail that, then you have the right to be let go. Now, if they keep him, that's something different. But my whole thing is that we want to see our managers be Jose Mourinho, Pep Guardiola. We want to see him be Jurgen Klopp. But if you look at the German managers, there are hundreds of them throughout the world. I mean, you look at Graham Potter was at what's it called in Sweden before he got to the Premier League. I mean, these guys, there are managers everywhere, and we need more than just Jesse carrying the flag for America to do this, because our expectations are always going to exceed what he's probably going to get the chance to do. Now, he's a pioneer in the sense that he's continuing to apply his trade. And we know that Bob Bradley tried that. We know that Greg Berhalter was in Sweden before at Charlie's old club. Like, we know that that's part of the case. But if you look at managers that go to the Premier League, there's a whole bunch of them that end up in the championship, that spend years in the championship, and maybe they end up somewhere else. Like, I think a career manager that can be successful is a really hard thing to define, especially in the American mindset, because in MLS, it's trophies, right? Because every coach every year has a chance to win the trophy. And I think it probably requires a couple clicks deeper than that, than just, where does he go from there? I think that he'll continue to probably push himself to stay there and take another difficult environment. But you're right, it probably is another step back in terms of the size of the club. But to go from a club that's in the Champions League and the Bundesliga to a Premier League club, pretty good jump.
Oh, no, of course. Charlie, any kind of thoughts on Jesse Marsch overall and what he symbolizes? Because, we've had a couple stabs at that. You know, we have David Wagner, who was at Huddersfield and just got fired from Young Boys this particular season. You know, we have some Americans that are out there doing their thing, but nobody's really broken through. And it felt like Jesse was our best chance. Are we putting too much pressure on him to be the guy, or do you think that's just part of the business?
I don't think we're putting unfair pressure on Jesse Marsch. It's just that's part of the business. He chose this path. I mean, that's why he ended up at Red Bulls in New York, because he saw a path, a line to Europe, and he did well with the Red Bulls in New York, which earned him the opportunity to go overseas and learn from Nagelsmann in the beginning to prep him to lead our Red Bull Salzburg. I think for Jesse, it's just continuing to learn and grow and adjust. You have to learn a new language. You got to be out of your comfort zone. And if you really want it and you put all the time and effort into it, you're eventually going to be successful. And I think Jesse going to Leeds is an ideal situation, especially if you stay in the Premier League. That's the best league in the world. It's almost like you got an upgrade leaving RB Leipzig to manage Leeds. So I think in that case, there's still hope that he can stay up. It's not going to be easy, but it's not unfair pressure. That's what you sign up for in this case. So I think for Americans, it's great. We all want to get behind any American manager that's managing overseas, because ultimately that's only going to raise our profile and raise our game, because he eventually is going to come back. He's eventually going to give their European teams are eventually going to give more American managers an opportunity. So we're all rooting for him.
Right, Jimmy, you're a kind of a strong-headed guy, and
am I? Is that the perception about me?
I that's the nicest way I can put it. Right, you're a competitive guy, but I feel like at times, and I struggle. This was probably my biggest struggle in my career, trusting people in positions of power. Right, and we hold our parents, which our kids are going to do to us. We hold our coaches, we hold everybody around us to being sort of having it all figured out and the answers to everything. And I guess the point that I'm trying to get at with this is that Jesse Marsch, as Charlie just said, is on this journey of being a manager, right? He started with nothing, has ideas, learns, is at the Red Bulls, then he's at Salzburg. Now he's in this family where he's part of this philosophy. Now he's completely outside of that, and he's going to apply certain things, but he's got to continue to learn. And I feel like some managers actually stop learning, and others in the modern game are continuing to evolve and grow. And I think there's something to that with Jesse Marsch, that's why he got another opportunity. I think he interviews well. I think he understands the game well. I think he's continuing to evolve with the speed or changing of the game, because I feel like the game is evolving quicker than it ever has before. And maybe they say that every generation, but in terms of the style of play, the tactics, the way it goes from the gegenpress exploding to, Liverpool not being in a gegenpress but are chasing everything. It's just the game is changing quickly because the quality of the game is so high. And I feel like Jesse Marsch is well positioned to be a career manager in Europe at very, very big clubs, whether that he helps Leeds survive or not. Do you think that, again, we are holding him to an unrealistic standard? Do you think he has more upside as a manager? I mean, I don't know how much time you've spent with Jesse in the last years or in the last decade, but
no, I did spend some time with him in between his jobs in MLS. So when he got let go from Montreal Impact, which I think was another stepping stone to him having success, right? I think you learn a lot from your failures. So he goes from that, then he comes into the league offices and does some media stuff with MLSsoccer.com. At the same time, I'm doing Kick TV. And we really got along. We were in the same office. We would joke around a lot. We were, always talking. We got to go get coffee, just talk the game a little bit. And then all of a sudden, he went to the New York Red Bulls. So Jesse Marsch disappeared. And then he just took off. It was like rocket fuel. The guy was just gone. Did well at Red Bulls and just decided, I'm leaving that to go to RB Leipzig and really got fast-tracked, because they can see what we can all see. He's got something to him. And I feel like even when he fails, he's got that little Teflon to him that he's just going to bounce back and be even stronger. And so are we being critical of him? I don't know if it's critical as much as just we're putting a lot of weight on his shoulders to be the guy that breaks through that glass ceiling. And I'm trying my best, because we have a real big tendency of overhyping our players here, and I feel like we might get into a little bit of that with our managers, especially when we know that
Newcastle goes down with the current manager that they have. They go down. Would you take Jesse Marsch out of it, take American out of it? Would you be like, get him out?
If Newcastle went down, or Leeds, or
say Newcastle, your team as a fan, you're probably going to want to change.
Well, we have oil money now, so we can go buy whoever we want.
Before, fine. When you were still in before the oil money came down, things were pretty ugly.
No, I think it depends on when the hire was made. So in Jesse Marsch's case, they were already in relegation.
They are singing the songs,
right?
True.
So at that point, you're hiring him knowing there's a good possibility, a good chance that you go down. And so if that's the case, you're sticking with the manager at that point. This isn't you're starting fresh and you're expected to place in the top 10 of the Premier League. This is, hey, you're coming into it. We believe that you can keep the club up. That's why we're hiring you. But we know there's a good chance you could go down. Look at the results. They knew the fixtures. It was like, okay, Arsenal, Chelsea. So from that perspective, I think they said, this is a guy that we can build a future with.
Did he come in after the Liverpool game? Was it after the Spurs game?
It's like they lost like 7-0 or something.
6-0
I can't remember.
to
it was bad.
Liverpool.
Yeah,
but
I mean,
all things considered,
it was like the worst month in Premier League history. They gave up more goals in a month than any other team in the history of the Premier League.
This last month was just as hard, though. Not in terms of the performances, but but they had Chelsea, Man City, and Arsenal all in a row, right? They had Man City, then Arsenal, then Chelsea. Obviously, they've got a couple of games to wrap up the season, which everybody's interested in, which is Brighton, Brentford, which is where the real test is going to come down to. You can't hold losing. You can't hold the schedule against him, because he did get some decent results along the way against your Watfords, Southamptons, other teams that are fighting. When I'm looking at the schedule here, Leeds against Crystal Palace, it's a draw. I mean, it's just hard to separate relegation from a manager, but at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at it non-emotionally, and it's hard with the Leeds fans. I know a lot of Leeds fans. But they didn't have Patrick Bamford, who scored a ton of goals for them last season. He's been in and out. Obviously, he came back, got hurt again. Calvin Phillips really hasn't been involved. When Liam Cooper, their center back, doesn't play, they
I can't believe we're doing a full segment on Jesse Marsch.
I know.